starting of course with the Hangar. The Hangar, otherwise known as E1M1, is simply the legendary Doom map, both for its design and its pumping music. Right from the start, it shows off height elevations, brightness levels, floor and ceiling textures, and non-square wall placements. Look to your right and you can see an animated nuclear waste pit and a skybox, essentially showing off Doom's improvement over Wolfenstein 3D. Beyond this, it makes a great invisible tutorial on the easier 2 difficulties with practice barrels, a single pistol zombie, and 2 imps with the ladder serving as a nice test of skill. Add to this the iconic horseshoe design and very memorable design overall, not to mention just enough secret areas to reward exploration, and it's very clear that Doom put its best foot forward with this one. Doom's E1M2, otherwise known as the nuclear plant. Much like the Hangar, there's a secret way outside, but it ups the complexity ever so slightly by having a switch that opens the doorway elsewhere, but you're richly rewarded with a soul sphere and chain gun. The level also introduces the concept of keys for a bit of depth, in addition to overall having much more in terms of optional areas. There's an entire dark maze that you can skip completely over if you so desire, but you'd be missing out on the many goodies within, including the backpack and chainsaw. Notably, the tall area near the end forced John Carmack to retool the Doom engine since Romero made it almost defiantly, not one to be restrained by engine limitations. However, while the nuclear plant is essentially bigger and more intricate, it's just not as iconic as the Hangar, so I'm ranking it below that. It's time for Doom's E1M3, the Toxin Refinery. The level that's probably best known for the blue key trap where the lights dramatically go off and imps come swarming out of a closet at you. It also has some 2 pretty interesting secrets, triggered in the same way as the E1M1's trigger line elevator. One leads you to a soul sphere and the other one to a rocket launcher in the level's secret exit. There's something pretty satisfying about hitting that switch, going back to the entrance and suddenly seeing a bridge there. As your curiosity peaks, the wall opens as you approach and there's this whole new area leading to the episode's secret level exit. Mind you, the standard exit path is also pretty cool, with a good amount of enemies to challenge you and some stairs that rise up. There's even a key in one secret to get a whole lot of goodies in another one. It's a very memorable map in its own right, and I'm placing it above the nuclear plant. The next ranked Doom level is E1M9 Military Base. I find the level to be charming if a bit cramped. If you're pistol starting, especially on higher difficulties, the beginning will be a true test of skill with imps in a cage and hit scan enemies on all sides. Soon after that, right in the open, there's a rocket launcher, but you'd best be prepared to fight for that little prize. If you know where to look, there's a far less booby-trapped chain gun for your picking up and spraying pleasure. Probably the most interesting secret though is one where you're challenged to hop across platforms. A lot of ammo awaits you if you're up for it, in addition to a chainsaw if you don't already have one. The rest of the level isn't too spectacular, a couple of keys tied to traps and then a dip in the nuclear waste, but it's still very solid. Overall, it's an enjoyable secret level that doesn't overstay its welcome, and I'm placing it above Toxin Refinery. Today's ranked Doom level is E1M4 Command Control. Probably the most noteworthy thing about the level is the very particular hooked symbol id Software originally put in a certain room. It was meant to be a reference to Wolfenstein 3D, but it was vague enough that people got the wrong idea, so it was subsequently changed to a more nonsensical shape. Also, it technically has a unique aspect of a missable secret with a one-time floor raise. If you botch it, you miss out on a soul sphere. Other than that, it's not too remarkable. There's a small maze, but it's not all that memorable, especially compared to the nuclear plant's optional dark maze. At least there's a healthy amount of height elevation near the beginning, and interestingly makes use of the starting level door as a regular open capable door. Overall, it's still a good level on its own merits, but it simply can't compete with the others, so I'm placing it below the nuclear plant. It's all about the E1M5 Phobos Lab. It certainly has some unique quirks, though not all for the better. There's a slightly vague way to progress with a little outpost that raises the platform to progress, but it's something you could easily trigger normally, so I'll give it a pass. It's definitely nowhere near as bad as the infamous Spirit World symbol. Another idea that isn't quite so sound is the very dark room at the end, and the light amplification goggles tucked in the corner feel more like a band-aid solution. Imposed nuclear waste tracking isn't the funnest in the world either, but at least there's a radiation suit if you can find it. One thing I find a bit odd is the secret that takes you back to the level's entrance, but the level isn't that big, so it saves you a few seconds at most. Probably the highlight of the level is the area behind the yellow key door where you drop down and tear through whatever stands in your way. Phobos Lab is alright, but in my opinion the weakest of the Episode 1 maps, so it's going right below Command Control. It's E1M6 Central Processing's time to shine. Right from the beginning, it presents itself as a relatively reasonably larger level. Perhaps the most interesting part is there's a wall in a room at the beginning that will close behind you and open up after a certain amount of time. You could technically wait it out, but you may as well grab the key and take on the retaliating forces while you're there. The funny thing is the map's defining feature, its maze, can be bypassed entirely within a secret. While there is a good amount of optional nukage trekking areas, the only technically mandatory one is a brief trek to a door late into the level. Perhaps the one part of the level that I wasn't so much a fan of is the ending where you're basically cramped into a smaller room with a lot of forces coming at you. It's not bad, but probably the weakest part of the level in my opinion. Still, it's a good level and a step up from Phobos Lab. I'm placing it right below Toxin Refinery. It's time to rank E1M7 Computer Station. In typical last non-boss level fashion, this is your real test of skills. The game basically throws everything at you. The level itself has a good amount of stuff to it and is decently large, especially the outside area. There's a good amount of optional areas in general, including an area that if you press the switch elsewhere has a chainsaw waiting for you. You can actually see a good amount of the level straight away, either from across nukage pits or across the outdoor area, so you get a good idea of the map's layout. The final area behind the blue door is when the level's just throwing imps and hit scanners at you on your way out, so a chain gun is heavily recommended. Thankfully, the level is generous enough to give you one via a leap of faith if you pistol started or somehow never got a chain gun until now. It's very fitting as a penultimate level leading into the boss, and the visibility of everything gives it a nice spacious feeling. It's going above the military base. It's time for the big finale to Episode 1, E1M8 Phobos Anomaly. You're greeted with pinkies surrounded by explosive barrels, which I'm guessing is for you to get your destructive urge on. You get a shotgun and chain gun if you've pistol started, but you'll only have a rocket launcher if you got one from a previous level. Just as well, a rocket launcher practically trivializes the final fight anyway. From here, it's a hallway and a lift to the main event, the Twin Barons of Hell. It's fitting to have two of them, although it's kinda funny because you can exploit nearby barrels to make them fight each other. I don't know if it was intended, but while their projectiles don't hurt each other, their claws very much do. Uniquely, it has a tag to lower the walls when both of them are down. The level even has a surprise ending where it ends with you surrounded by enemies in a pitch black room to imply you've died or at least been trapped in hell. Not the best level, but still a fitting finale. I'm placing it below Central Processing. I'm actually going to be talking about E1M10 Sewers. Even if it's not part of the original levels, it was included in a commercial release of Doom 3, so I think it's fair game. Frankly, the level is a big hot mess, bombarding you with misaligned textures and poor stair placements from the beginning. The rest of the level doesn't get much better, with confusing water branch paths making it most of it. This one blinking hallway was especially obnoxious, and the level never really gets any better from there. The level doesn't even really make use of lighting, other than lighting up whole rooms, giving it a flat look even by Doom standards. The end of the level seems like it's just big for the sake of being big, not really using its heights or size for anything interesting. Easily the worst of the commercial levels, let alone Doom 1 levels, it doesn't deserve to have a slot knee deep in the dead. Permanently at the bottom of the list, just play Sergeant Mark's remake, even if you don't plan to use it with Brutal Doom. It's time to reign in the shores of hell with E2M1 Deimos Anomaly. Depending on the difficulty, it will either contain cacodemons or a single lost soul. Either way, you now know flying demons exist. The level itself is fairly small, but enough to make things interesting with optional areas like a locked door with blue armor and an area map. It even introduces the plasma rifle, arguably the most useful weapon for dealing with the more tougher enemies since it doesn't need to be charged. The beginning with a damaging inverted cross certainly sets the tone of being more hellish than before. There's even a subtle horseshoe design, even if it's nowhere near as pronounced as the hangars. Overall, it's a pretty decent way to start the episode. I'm placing it below Phobos Anomaly. This time the subject's on E2M2 Containment Area, aka that level with a pretty extensive crate maze. At least it fits pretty well with the introduction to the Berserk Pack. Those sharp corners provide opportunities for surprise super punching. There's actually a good amount of optional content in the level for those bold enough to go exploring. Sure, you could speed through the level, but there's a rocket launcher, chain gun, chainsaw, and plasma rifle waiting for you. This is in addition to things like a soul sphere, blue armor, and a backpack. One slight caveat is it also introduces the idea of having to wait somewhat, both optionally for floor raising and mandatory for crusher ceilings. If you decided to forego easier difficulties for the previous level, this is also the level to introduce the Lost Soul, that living, flipping projectile. Overall though, it's a solid level and I'd place it just above Deimos Anomaly. Today's ranked catch is E2M3 Refinery. Two things you'll notice about the level immediately are that you get attacked from the beginning in Ultraviolence and Nightmare, and the level's music is the intermission music. Probably the most interesting part of the level is from a pistol start because you can dash into the room to the right for a chain gun. Of course you'll also have a horde to deal with, but hey, Berserk Pack. There's also a shotgun a bit farther down, but you'll probably have to take a dip in the nuclear pits for it. There isn't that much else to say about the level, to be honest, other than little things like a plasma rifle secret and a Baron serving as a damage sponge. Just some dark rooms and a quick trek through a nuclear pit round out the exit. Overall, it's a pretty forgettable map, but I'll place it just above Phobos Lab. Today's superstar is E2M4 Deimos Lab. It certainly has an interesting way of starting out with a dark room and a blinking light with a teleporter leading out. If you're inquisitive enough, the wall the light is hitting opens to a secret shotgun, a godsend on a pistol start. From there, the level remains reasonably open with the first area containing a moat of nuclear waste. There's a pretty decent amount of optional areas here, such as a room with a crusher ceiling in the center marked by pools of blood, as well as 10 secrets. Probably the low point of the level is a tower that requires you to wait for each steps to raise up along the way. At least there's a more interesting mystery doors optional segment nearby and another secret that lets you skip to the top of the stairs. Overall, I would consider it a pretty solid if flawed level with enough positives to overlook the negatives, and I'd place it above Phobos Anomaly. Today we're being plunged into E2M5 Command Center. This is definitely a map that encourages exploration, and I am all over that. This level actually has the secret level of the episode, and it's easy to find if you're paying attention, but also easy to miss if you aren't. This map also has a good amount of barons in it, too near the beginning almost as a callback to Phobos Anomaly. An optional long trek through nuclear waste leads to a very interesting curved platform area with a plasma rifle serving as the secret's big prize. Aesthetically, it also has a nice variety of areas, ranging from concrete base to wooden areas and more hellish marble, not to mention areas that are covered in vines and roots. Easily the best Episode 2 map so far, I'm placing it above Central Processing. It's time to stumble into E2M9, the Fortress of Mystery. It's a weak map. Next. No, but seriously, this is a map that very much relies on throwing tough enemies at you because you start surrounded by 4 barons. The door out leads to a T-shaped room full of cacodemons. While there are weapons in the starting area, there's not enough ammo if you're going on a pistol start. Your best hope for getting through this one is to provoke war between the two sides and then pick off the survivors. After that, the level is basically over. It's basically just opening a wall and grabbing all 3 skull keys one after another to reach the exit. Short of stalling you so you don't just run past the carnage, this seems incredibly pointless. It's the weakest of the original levels and painfully short even compared to the 2 upcoming boss levels. It's going only above Sewers, and even then not by much. Right now, it looks like we're trapped in E2M6, the Halls of the Damned. One thing I actually find kind of cool about this level is your goal is to find 3 keys to hit the exit. It shares this distinction with the Doom 2 Citadel, but there's no cheap tricks here, gotta have all 3. Like Citadel though, the map's opened up and you can get them in any order you want. The blue one you're likely to run into first, it's just there with a monster closet guarding it. The red one's in a dimly lit room that honestly does the concept much better than Phobos Lab since there's crumbs of light to help you navigate. The yellow one's about as hard to get as the blue one, you just go into a vine-covered room and go around the corner. There's not too much to the level, but there's a decent amount of optional areas including a fake exit. You already passed the real exit, so it might be obvious, but it's still unique and kinda neat. Overall, it's a good level, and I always applaud non-linearity. I'm placing it below command control. It's time to take a dip in E2M7, spawning Vats. Probably the most significant part of this level by far is the historical aspect. What I mean is the level design of the earliest known alpha versions of Doom were very noticeably incorporated into this level. That's not to say the rest of the level isn't pretty good, there's a decent amount of detail all throughout. There's enough in terms of optional areas to keep you occupied if you feel like going for exploring, and the level thoughtfully gives you a couple of invulnerability spheres to play with. There's a nice mix of large and small areas and enough demons to keep you busy. Also, funnily enough, the switch to access the exit is a fake out door with a real switch behind it. Doesn't really add to anything, I just thought it was kind of funny. Overall, it's a solid level and a nice remnant of Doom's past. I'm placing it above command control. It's time to tackle E2M8, the Tower of Babel. The level certainly knows how to make an entrance with barons strewn up on the walls around you. Really makes you wonder what kind of monster would make sport out of Barons. You quickly find out outside with the introduction of the Cyber Demon. You've really got your work cut out for you on a pistol start because not only does he fire 3 rockets one after another, but he's immune to splash damage. This means your own rockets are nerfed, and on higher difficulties, lost souls are even present to make it a risky maneuver. At least it's only one this time, even if he has enough health and firepower to rival a whole room full of Barons. Overall, the design is on the small side and leaves something to be desired, but it's a solid introduction for the Cyber Demon and it goes right below Phobos Anomaly. I'm kicking off Inferno with E3M1 Hellkeep. The beginning is alright with a nice switch leading you up to 1 to 3 imps. If you're at anything beyond the first 2 difficulties though, you'll have 1 or even 2 Cacodemon waiting for you on the other side of that door. Unless you're playing some console version that lets you keep your weapons between episodes, or you enjoy wasting your time pea-shooting Cacodemons, I would just skirt around it and make a beeline for the shotgun. At least there's a box of shells at the end, albeit possibly guarded by imps. A lot of the level though seems more like it's taking advantage of being the beginning of an episode to start out with next to nothing. Trust me, that's a subject that will crop up again in the future with the next starter level. It's not exactly the best of starter levels, and it relies more on the lack of ammunition than being especially interesting, so I'm placing it below Refinery. Surprise, it's the Jaguar version of Hellkeep. Conceptually, it starts out kind of like the original, with an imp in front of 2 boxes of ammo. You'll notice though that the design is very different, and you can actually get a shotgun from the beginning. However, that doesn't mean it's easy. If you pistol start, which is possible on this PC WAD or the GBA version, good luck getting 100% kills without infighting. The PS1 version, the base for this one, has a freaking Revenant in Ultraviolence. Beyond the difficulty on an Ultraviolent pistol start, it's a very visually pleasing level with good use of red brick and skin textures. Overall, it's a big improvement over the original Hellkeep, especially for visual design, but also complexity of. I'm placing it below Phobos Anomaly. Prepare to enter E2M2, the Slough of Despair. On an Ultraviolent pistol start, it's a pretty hectic run from the start as you look around for resources. Grabbing the chain gun and a shotgun off a sergeant become pretty necessary, and it's pretty fun running for every scrap you can find. You'll also quickly notice that the level is shaped like a hand, which is pretty cool. Only 2 fingers are mandatory, leaving 2 fingers and a thumb for optional areas. A rocket launcher and berserk pack, in addition to a very obvious plasma rifle secret if you ever pay attention to your auto map, really help if you're hurting for resources. There isn't too much to the 2 optional fingers, but it works well enough for exchanging more fighting to get more resources. I have to hand it to this level, it's pretty finger looking good and had me eating out of the palm of its hand, so I'm placing it above the Jaguar Hellkeep. It looks like you're stuck in E3M3 Pandemonium. If you're ultraviolent pistol starting, you'd better act fast from the beginning unless you want to get walled in by a pinky and have to use your weak little pistol. The good news is you can look for a shotgun and some ammunition nearby, but you really have to run for it. It's ironic that this initial spot is such a crunch for resources because this level actually has the BFG in it. It's in a very damaging mode, but thankfully the level has a solution for that in the form of an invulnerability sphere. There are technically 3 paths to get through the level, in addition to a whole optional secret area with a poison water bridge. Overall, it is a pretty alright level with some pretty tight design, and I'm placing it below Tower of Babel. You'll be entering the House of Pain next time, but right now, we'll be spending today in the House of Pain. Right from the get-go, you've got optional areas on both sides of you, which I suggest you use if you're ultraviolent pistol starting. On the left actually leads to a berserk pack, a godsend against those early pinkies. It also pairs nicely with an invulnerability sphere further down if you're careful with the crusher ceilings. Pull it off and it's like you're in the Donkey Kong arcade game and just got a hammer. From there, the level's pretty standard until you hit Trial and Error of the video game with 8 skull switches. Weirdly, also some mandatory damage floor trekking, but it's covered with medkits and a radiation suit secret nearby, making it seem pointless. Overall, it's another alright map with some weird quirks, and I'm placing it just above Nuclear Plant. The Unholy Cathedral will be next on the travel plan, but it's time to enter E3M5, the Unholy Cathedral. The good news for my fellow ultra-violent pistol starters is you can get to a shotgun fairly quickly. The bad news is you'll have to fight a Baron for it, but you'll also get an invulnerability sphere. Also, unless you already know to go to the teleporter on the top left, it can be annoying with 3 of them zipping you back to the center. Or maybe you notice that the right one has a pulsing light, but let's keep this our little secret, okay? The rest of the level is fine. The blue key area with the crusher ceilings is interesting, and since you can press switches from the side, it only affects the teleporter. Also of note is an area beyond the exit where you can get a BFG with a teleporter trap, but you can run past it pretty quickly if you want. Some other pretty good optional areas too, like a plasma rifle and a damaging floor room rounded out. Overall, it's a pretty fun map with a slightly annoying teleporter area. I'm placing it below the Jaguar Hellkeep. Now's the time to ascend E3M6 Mt Erebus. It's quite an ascension too, because this is probably one of the larger of the original Doom levels. The funny thing though is the secret exit is also very fast to get into. As always, an ultraviolet pistol start keeps things the most interesting with risk and reward for supplying yourself, although the level mercifully gives you a sergeant at the beginning to cough up a shotgun. Weirdly though, the level's normal and secret exits sort of both require you to go through the same secret teleporter, just hopping into a different spot. Thankfully though, it's at least marked with a candle. There's also a good amount of optional areas and equipment to deal with the hordes, including a pretty easy to find plasma rifle. Overall, it's a nice beefy level with a good amount of length. Potentially, I'm placing it above spawning vats. Today's video is all about E3M9 Warrens. Man, talk about lazy, all they did was copy the first level, thus making this the absolute worst. Or at least that's what they want you to think. Getting to what was the teleporter exit instead lowers the wall and you're face to face with a cyber demon. Things just got real. You get a rocket launcher and invulnerability sphere, but now you've got to backtrack back to the beginning. All the while, new areas have opened up with more enemies to face. It kinda falls apart after that though, with a hall full of shotgun sergeants for that delightful old hit scan spam. At least it was probably a good surprise twist at the time, and the early issues with the pistol start are more user choice since you'd have more firepower by now going from level to level. It's going just below spawning vats. Today we find ourselves stuck in E3M7 Limbo. Right from the get-go, the level is not shy about pitting you up against a lot of pinkies. That's not too big of an issue and you can make your way through, but the more insidious part of the level rears its ugly head later on. After a maze for the red key, you then have to go through several teleporters in a specific order to reach the exit. One to raise a platform for a key, one to use key to raise a platform, one to go through said platform and lock door to raise the exit platform, and finally to the exit. This wouldn't be so bad except each one is spread out and almost always surrounded by boiling blood. Unless you like making return trips to the earlier maze to get radiation suits, you don't have time, so you better be good at memorizing. To say it was annoying was an understatement. The level has some interesting spots, but it's too bogged down by hazard floor find the teleporter, so it's going below the original Hellkeep. The time has come for the penultimate original Doom level, E3M8 Dis. Basically, it's an X-shaped level with two cacodemons, a Baron, and the Spider Mastermind. There's only really ledges around the level with ammo, and a center room with a plasma rifle and blue armor. Frankly, it's about as bare bones as you can get, falling way short of even Tower of Babel. As for the Spider Mastermind itself, it's frankly my least favorite monster in the entire game. Hit scan, rapid fire, and bullet sponge, these three things combined are annoying. It encourages you to either corner shoot or BFG trick shot. The Cyber Demon felt like a much more satisfying boss, even soaking up more damage. Pistol starting is the worst, your best bet is to distract it within fighting the other three while you get equipment. Frankly, Dis is the weakest of the boss levels, and it's only going just above the Fortress of Mystery, and even then only because it introduces something new. It's time to probe the depths of E4M1, Hell Beneath. Remember when I said I'd get back to starter levels taking advantage of being low on resources? Well, the ammo in this level isn't vast, it's health especially that the level is firmly stingy on. Specifically, there's only 9 health bonuses and literally nothing else. This is at a level with a good amount of shotgun sergeants and 1 mandatory Baron unless you're on easy. If you actually want to 100% the level, then there's even more Barons to deal with. This is in addition to a teleporter trap where enemies in the initial closet, including shotgun sergeants, can shoot out at you before teleporting. This may be the one time that pistol starting each level is doing myself a favor, because this level will leave you well drained. Overall, in case you couldn't tell, I'm not especially fond of this war of attrition, and it's getting placed below Halls of the Damned. It's time to go down the Sith path in E4M2 Perfect Hatred. Probably notable is that the level only took Romero 6 hours to make, and honestly it kind of shows. As I mentioned in my Doom 2 ranking video, O of Destruction does the beginning concept better since you don't really have room to move here, especially unfortunate with the approaching cacodemon. The level does get more manageable after you clear out the main room, but you can still expect things like Barons in tight spaces. The level has such little chill that it has a cyber demon in it, and while you can telefrag him, you still have to get past him and then run back to do it. It's also the earliest level of the 4 episodes to have a secret level exit in it. At the very least, it's a mild improvement and isn't so stingy on resources, so it's going above Hell Beneath. It's time to test your courage in E4M9 Fear. Right from the start, you're bombarded with enemies, but at least you have a lot more space to move around in. Taking cover as well as grabbing a nearby plasma rifle really help on an ultra-violent pistol start, especially against the Cacodemons and Baron. You can actually exit the level relatively fast, with most of the levels serving as optional areas. It's definitely not a level you want to rush through though, at least after you clear out the initial room. You could easily find yourself overwhelmed, but it's much more manageable if you take it a piece at a time. At least the level is somewhat accommodating to pistol starters with shotgun sergeants for shotguns as well as a chain gun, rocket launcher, and plasma rifle to find. Not the most memorable map overall, but much milder and enjoyable than the first 2 maps of the episode, so I'm placing it above House of Pain. Grab a blade and we'll do E4M3 Sever the Wicked. This is the 3rd or 2nd if you skip the secret level to start you off with a horde on you. I'm beginning to sense a pattern going on here. Well, at least you're handed a shotgun and an invulnerability sphere and chain gun nearby, but this level will test your patience, especially with shotgun sergeants. Well, at least the level itself has a very interesting design, separated into a courtroom with lava pits to hop over and a very vertically inclined interior. On an ultra-violent pistol start though, this level will definitely push you and you'll be grateful for every morsel, both secret and otherwise. Speaking of secrets though, did you know there's a well-known design oversight with crevices with torches marked as secrets, making it impossible to get 100% secrets without a possible exploit? Overall, it's a well enough design level, albeit a very horde-filled one. It's going above Fear. We'll be looking at the most unruly evil next time, but today's foe is E4M4 Unruly Evil. It's actually pretty refreshing to have a starting room and a level that's overall pretty chill. It's probably the first episode 4 level to feel like more of a traditional Doom level. If you're ultra-violent pistol starting, it has a bit of a Pandemonium start where you have to get around specters to get to a shotgun. Some imps in a lower crevice in the next room guard a chain gun, and you can find a rocket launcher if you pay attention to the torch colors. There's also a nice risk versus reward lava room with specters and cacodemons with the reward of a soul sphere and invulnerability sphere. The rest of the level is pretty predictable though, with a locked red door and 2 switches between you and the exit. Naturally, each has a monster closet attached to it. At least it makes some decent use of verticality. Overall, it's not a level that's going to thrill you too much, but it's a nice breath of fresh air and it's going right below Warrens. Demons will fall in E4M5, they will repent. The theme is very much a hellish castle covered in boiling blood, but thankfully most of it doesn't need to be traversed. The level is populated with the expected crowds of enemies, notably lost souls and peaky/specters, but nothing too major. A single Baron serves as the level's beefiest challenge even on ultra-violence, so it's got a similar chill as the previous level. It kinda makes you wonder why the levels are placed the way they are, but I won't complain. Interestingly, you can skip a key to the exit, but if you miss the jump onto a ledge, you might be barred out of the level's BFG. Weirdly, it also has an invulnerability sphere in the corner, near the end of the level where you're probably not going to need it. Overall, it's another pretty decent level with enough twists and turns to be interesting. It's going above Sever the Wicked. Prepare for resistance as we address E4M6 against the Wickedly. The level starts out unassumedly enough, just a trek down the mountains, but in my opinion it goes down like a lead balloon from there. For some reason, old Romero thought it would be a good idea to force you into a lava pit that drains 10% health each round and covered in things like specters to block you. If you don't have enough health, which despite the medkits is possible due to lost souls and sergeants in the beginning, you're basically boned. You can find a plasma rifle in a secret and get a radiation suit if you go into the right side, but that shouldn't be required. Nor is knowing what 4-sided teleporter you need to go through. Even the Cyber Demon fight is too cramped to be engaging unless you know where the BFG and invulnerability sphere are, in which case it becomes way too trivial. Overall, it's a nice looking map, but the abundance of hazardous floors and confusion bog down the experience playing through it. It's going only just above Dis. It's time to pioneer into E4M7 and Hell Followed. It's kind of funny seeing a relatively chill level after one that puts you through the mouth of hell. The difficulty curve for this episode is a real roller coaster. Obviously, that doesn't mean you can just turn your brain off at this level, especially the courtyard at the end. There's also a Cyber Demon, but it's optional and you can get an invulnerability sphere and BFG to make it pretty one-sided. Most of the level really is optional, including 2 of the keys. Of course, if you're ultra-violent pistol starting, you might want to take a bit of your time to build yourself up first. The level isn't too big overall, so you can get through it fairly quickly, but at least it has a few twists and turns like crusher ceilings or lights turning off E1M3 style. All around, it's a pretty alright level with enough optional areas to not get too dull. It's going above Halls of the Damned. It's time for the grand finale of Ultimate Doom, E4M8 Onto the Cruel. It's easily the most feature-complete boss level of the four, even compared to Phobos Anomaly, and just feels like a normal level with a spider tacked on at the end. Doesn't help that the spider was faced before, and opposite of Dis, the spider is actually at a pretty big disadvantage here. Given I dislike that big-brained menace so much, that's probably not a bad thing, but maybe something like the Cyber Demon would have been more appropriate. The beginning is basically hit scan spam. There's a chain gun secret in the beginning, and if you're pistol starting, you really want it. There isn't too much to say other than a Baron behind every locked door. There's also multiple elevators with items on them, interestingly enough. Overall, it's not great, but definitely the better of the two spider boss levels. You can do far worse for a finale, so it's going above Perfect Hatred. That's every Ultimate Doom map ranked from best to worst in my humble opinion. While it's a bit scattered in terms of quality, Knee Deep in the Dead is the most iconic, with Hangar just being the living embodiment of Doom. Not counting the very poor sewers from the Xbox's Collector's Edition of Doom 3, the Fortress of Mystery was definitely the weakest by relying purely on tough enemies, making it kind of sad that 4 console versions of Doom actually end on it. Although at least they arguably got the better Hellkeep, so maybe it balances out a little. Generally, Thy Flesh Consumed had weaker levels that seemed to be misarranged because they're all over the place based on difficulty. What do you think though? Are there any levels you feel I placed too high or too low on the list? Feel free to let me know in the comments down below.